Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Imy Nixon. This is episode 64. And joining me as always from Austin, Texas, the stat king himself, Michael Ween. What is up, man?
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am doing well. I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to episode 64. It's a big one. Today we are 12 days out from the 2021 NFL draft, and we are doing our first ever alternating pick first round mock draft. So we're going to go through the full first round. Emmy is going to take the odd picks. I will take the even picks. But there is a catch, and that catch comes near the bottom of the top 10. I will be picking 8 and 9 so that Emmy can pick for his Cowboys at 10, and he will pick 11 as well. But other than that, it'll be just a normal alternating mock draft where I pick the even numbers and he picks the odds. So let's waste no time. Let's get into this. Emmy Nixon has the first pick.
All right, let me put my
the
GM hat on.
Jaguars.
Yeah, Jacksonville Jaguars, soon to be London Jaguars, maybe. Not really. Okay, the first overall pick, we're going with Trevor Lawrence. Pretty self-explanatory there. That's been basically the for sure thing the entire process of this draft. So we'll move on to the second pick for you, New York Jets.
I forgot to mention, I have a spreadsheet going before we get to that. And so if I'm looking over here, every time we make a selection, I will be typing in the selection to the spreadsheet so that we can keep track of who's picked who and kind of who's off the board, that type of thing.
Right.
So that's what I'm doing as of now. But with the second pick in the 2021 Raw Prospect Podcast NFL Draft 1.0, the New York Jets will be selecting Zach Wilson, quarterback from BYU. And the reason, I have my doubts about him, as do many people. I mean, if you look at him, some of the concerns, he's not built ideally for an NFL quarterback, and that brings on some, durability concerns at the next level. Taking a lot of hits could hurt him, and sometimes he tends to rely on his arm a little too much. But everyone, all the scouts, all the analysts, all the reporters are saying the draft starts at 3 with San Francisco. Zach Wilson is pretty much a lock to the Jets at number 2, especially now that they just recently traded away Sam Darnold. So this is definitely going to be a quarterback, and 99% chance it'll be Zach Wilson. So I wasn't going to waste any time trying to argue for Justin Fields at this spot. And I just went with Zach Wilson.
Right. And Zach Wilson, he went all under the radar basically that entire college football year. I mean, there was a little smidgen of thought to where they might have a chance at the playoff, but once they lost to Coastal Carolina, it was all done for BYU. But he had a fantastic year. I mean,
right. Let me add something. Sorry to interrupt.
Right.
He ranked top 3 nationally in several passing categories, including yards, about 3,700 yards, touchdowns 33, completion percentage an astounding 73.5%. So he's very accurate. He understands ball placement, and he's a very good thrower of the deep ball, which should translate well at the next level. And he also ranked in the top 3 in yards per attempt. So he was throwing the ball downfield, which we also like to see in quarterback prospects. So I have my doubts, but I think that will be the pick for the Jets at number 2. So now this is where I think the real draft starts with San Francisco at 3. So, Emmy, who are you taking the number 3 overall pick?
Right. And this is one I had to think about a little bit. I I'm gonna go Justin Fields here, number 3
Okay.
pick. I think um, the problem with assuming that the 49ers are going to pick Mac Jones is a lot of people are ignoring the fact that that could all just be a smokescreen. And
Right.
honestly, that's what I think it is. I don't think they would have moved up to 3 if they were just going to get Mac Jones. I think if they were going to get Mac Jones, I think they could have afforded to move to maybe 6 or 7, somewhere in that range. But moving all the way up to 3, giving up all those picks, you got to be sure that you're getting a guy who has elite potential. Mac Jones, he has the ability to be a starting quarterback right now, a solid starting quarterback right now, but so does Justin Fields. The difference to me between these two prospects is the athleticism and just the arm talent and arm strength. Um, it just separates them slightly, and Justin Fields has the higher ceiling to me. Mac Jones has a high floor, um, but Justin Fields has the much higher ceiling. So if you're going up to number 3, you got to get the guy with the elite upside, because if you can get that elite quarterback play with the roster that you already have in place, then that's well worth it.
I agree with that pick. Very good pick there. Okay, so with the Falcons at number 4, they have a lot of needs, mainly on defense. But of course, there's not a defensive prospect that I value this highly. I think the wise thing to do for the Falcons would be to see if they can get some offers and trade down, acquire more picks, just because of the amount of needs that they have. I don't see them taking a quarterback here. I think the move would be either to trade out or just take the next best player available that's not a quarterback, and that would be Kyle Pitts. So I'm going to take Kyle Pitts to add to an already very good stable of receiving talent down there in Atlanta with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. And I'm going to add a versatile tight end / wide receiver, a guy who can move around the formation, who's versatile, has elite pass catching skills, didn't drop a single ball all of last year, led Florida in all the possible receiving categories you can name. He has a very large catch radius, which is also something we look for in prospects, special athleticism. The only real knocks on Kyle Pitts are that he's a little bit lean and could put on some weight, and he's not the best blocker in the world. But that will come, I think that those skills will improve given that he'll be in the weight room constantly at this next level. And he'll probably be asked to block some, but not a whole lot, because they have other tight ends capable of blocking. And so I think they'll be able to mask some of his weaknesses. I know that Atlanta already has 2 very good receivers, and, they probably will likely trade down, but I don't see how you can pass up on Kyle Pitts. They're saying he's a generational talent just because of his versatility and his athleticism for a guy his size. You just restructured Matt Ryan's contract for 2 more years, so why not give him all the help that he needs in the world with a generational prospect?
Right, exactly. And in the last mock we did 10 picks, I believe.
Right.
I made the choice to not select Kyle Pitts at 4, and honestly, I regret that. I went back and watched that franchise guy. He's a YouTuber that I watch a lot of draft content with. He did a film breakdown, and within like the first 2 plays, this guy just has it. It's hard to explain. He just got it. Like every single like play is an opportunity for him to just break loose and score. That's just what it felt like. It felt like he was just playing against little boys out there. And getting an athlete, just getting a player with that level of talent, I mean, you can't go wrong with that. So,
Right.
really good pick there. I definitely agree with that pick. I've changed my opinion.
And you're not really going to be able to double team him
Right.
because they have so many other weapons. So that's just another thing to think about. But on to the number 5 pick with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Right. And this is a no-brainer. I think I gotta go with the offensive lineman. And if I look at the offensive lineman on the board, it's Rashad Bateman, Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater. Oh, why did I say Rashad Bateman? I meant to say Rashawn Slater. But Rashawn Slater, Penei Sewell. I'm going with Penei Sewell. There was some stories that some teams didn't like some of Penei Sewell's like off-field stuff, like work ethic, that type of thing. But I think you just want to get the best tackle possible right away. And Penei Sewell will step in and be a top 10 tackle in the NFL, in my opinion. So, I mean, he's just a stud. He's just once he gets his hands on you as a defensive lineman, you're done. Like you can't get away from him. Like he's just too big. So that's a no-brainer pick for me.
He's a mauler, and they need to protect Joe Burrow, especially coming off an injury as serious as this one. You can't afford to not protect him at all costs. And they do have some good pieces on that offensive line, but just fortify it with one of the best prospects we've seen at the offensive line position, maybe since what's his name for the Colts, Quentin Nelson, who was drafted, a couple years back or whatever. So that's what they're saying, at least. So good pick there. He'll be a day one starter. I don't think the character issues will be too much of a problem. I don't really buy into that.
Right. I don't either.
And I think you hate to pass him up. Even though Slater's another really good prospect, you hate to pass up Penei Sewell.
Right, so exactly.
Let me just type that in real fast. Okay, so for Miami at number 6, they have a roster that's ready to contend for the playoffs. They won 10 games last year, but obviously they made a lot of trades in the past couple of years, so they've acquired, a lot of picks. They're also picking at 18, so I'll make another selection for them when we get down to that position. But for this one, by trading out of the number 3 selection, they basically told us that they're sticking with Tua Tagovailoa. I think they could go offensive line here, but I'm going with the best receiving prospect in the draft with Jamar Chase. I know that they added a couple receivers, I believe, in free agency with the likes of Will Fuller, and they have a couple other guys, solid receivers. But I think you got to go out and get a for sure day one playmaker in Jamar Chase from LSU. Now, he was one of those guys like Penei Sewell who opted out of the 2020 season. But when last seen on a college football field against some of the best defensive prospects, cornerbacks that we see on a day-to-day basis in the NFL, he was one of the best players on the field. He in 2019, he was voted a unanimous All-American, and he set single-season SEC records. Think about this, with all the great receivers that have come out of the SEC. Single-season SEC records for receiving yards with 1,780 and touchdowns, 20 in that season. Now, it did help that he had, he was on possibly the best offense in college football history that year. With that LSU offense with Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, all those guys. But I think for Miami, if you're going to stick with Tua, go out and get them some playmakers, because the other playmakers they have do have their fair share of injury concerns. And I just think they should go out and get a day one, possibly number one overall. He has that potential to be a number one receiver. Just go out and get this guy, playmaker, um, strong acceleration, gear change, elite after the catch ability, elite toughness, can go up and get those 50-50 balls. Basically can do a little bit of everything. So I won't drag on too long, but
Right.
that's my pick.
And one interesting thing about Jamar Chase is we saw Justin Jefferson come off of that LSU team that won that national championship and dominate in the NFL. But he wasn't the best receiver on that team. Jamar Chase was. So
Right.
it'll be really interesting to see what he's able to do in the NFL, because he was dominant in that national championship run. He was Joe Burrow's number one target. And I think one of his most underrated traits is just his ability to track the football on those back shoulder plays. He had so much chemistry with Joe Burrow specifically. But like, I think he can obviously develop that with his whoever he ends up with. But just having that ability to adjust when the ball's in the air, that's
Right.
not as easy as wide receivers make it seem. So
Right.
it's a good pick there. Okay, so number 7 pick is the Detroit Lions. So this is an interesting spot. So they just traded for Jared Goff, right? So they have their quarterback presumably for at least a year, I'd say. I was thinking it would be great for Detroit if they could go defensive line or defensive edge, but this is not that great of an edge class, and I think that would be a bit of a reach at 7. So for me, it was between cornerback Patrick Surtain and the 2 Alabama wide receivers, Jalen Waddle and Travis Etienne. You could go Micah Parsons, linebacker, but I was a little bit hesitant there since you want to jumpstart the offense and build the culture. That's first and foremost. So I actually, when I was doing prep, I didn't write down any players that I was going to pick. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to do something that I was not planning on doing at all. I'm going to take Rashawn Slater, and I'm just going to, if I'm Detroit, I'm establishing myself as a physical football team, running the football, just dominant up front. They already have a pretty good offensive line, but if you have you throw in your Sean Slater in there, maybe move a couple guys around, and you establish that as your elite position group, you can build your team from there. I think that's the right foundation that you need to have. I think you can get defensive line later in this draft, and obviously you already have Jeff Okudah at cornerback, so that wasn't as big of a need. So offensive line here, Rashawn Slater, out of Northwestern.
Good pick. Something I really didn't see coming when I was planning my picks.
Right.
So now I have picks at 8 and 9. Emmy will have picks 10 and 11. I did have Carolina at number 8 taking Rashawn Slater.
Ooh.
But Detroit slid up and took him. So now I'm kind of stuck in a pickle here. As far as Carolina goes, offensive line and wide receiver were sort of the needs that that jumped off the page to me. I think now that Slater's off the board, I'm not sure you would reach for a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker or Tevin Jenkins or Christian Darrisaw here at number 8 position. I think their offensive line is pretty solid. I do think they could add one more piece, but given that you took Slater, who was probably the most fit to go in the top 10 other than Sewell, I'm thinking, and they went out in free agency. They added some defensive talent. They obviously drafted all defense last year. So I don't think you really need to go defense here. I think I'm going to go with one of the Bama wide receivers here to add to the young receiving core with DJ Moore and I forgot who else they brought in, but I think they do need some receiving depth given that they lost Curtis Samuel. People have their concerns about Devontae Smith, and rightfully so. He hasn't worked out yet, and people have concerns about his weight and his durability at the next level. I think I'm going to go Jalen Waddle, a wide receiver out of Alabama, for the Carolina Panthers. So let me just type that in real fast. I didn't have any notes on him, but when he last played, he was unbelievable. I think he'll be a good depth piece. He has the speed, the physicality to succeed at the next level. I don't know if he's a number one or not, but he'll be a good piece to add for the Panthers. So for the Broncos at 9, they have needs. I think they're one of the more like well-rounded football teams given except, for the most important position, which is quarterback. And Drew Lock obviously hasn't, shown us that he can be a good quality NFL starting quarterback. He ranked bottom 3 in a lot of passing categories, including quarterback rating, according to Pro Football Focus. He was one of the worst in pretty much every statistical category. I think they could add some cornerback depth. I have a concern for them at middle linebacker, but I think since Trey Lance is sitting there at 9, I think I'll go with Trey Lance to come in and compete with Drew Lock. So that'd be my pick for Denver.
That's 9. That's a fun pick right there. I think that would be a fun if they ended up making that pick. I think that would be a fun team to have Hard Knocks on. Just highlighting that competition would be really interesting, and also some of the personalities in that locker room. But
right.
What's your take on Trey Lance just overall? I mean, I haven't watched the guy in terms of like a full game. I've watched some of his tape, some of his highlights, and from what I've heard about him, it seems like he's just a mystery because the offense that North Dakota State ran was a power running scheme where it seemed like he was only throwing like about 17 to 20 times a game. So it's a interesting prospect.
I get some of the concerns. I don't think they would draft him and ask him to come in and start day one. I still think that Drew Lock will be their day one starter. I think, you're getting all the physical upside. He's an unprecedented evaluation given he hasn't played a lot. He only played one game this year due to the COVID restrictions. Not a lot of people got to see him. Doesn't have a lot of tape. But in his sophomore season, he completed 67% of his – now, this is against lesser competition, but it's still 67% of his passes, 2,800 yards, 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions to go along with over 1,000 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns. So that just shows you like he's very heady. Actually was asked to call all of his own pass protections. He had to, prepare heavily for each game, call all of his own pass protections. So he's a very smart player. He doesn't really turn the ball over a lot. He's very safe with the football. He brings all the physical upside. I think maybe you give Drew Lock another year. We've seen Drew Lock have some injury problems. So if he does, maybe Trey Lance will get playing time. But I think for Denver, it's just all about the upside right now. You have a lot of talent on that offense. So I think just bringing in a guy to compete with Drew Lock will be a good prospect for the Broncos.
Right. And I agree. I definitely agree with that. It seems like every arrow is leaning towards they're going to stick with True Lock. But I think if you're the Broncos, go ahead and put the pressure on him. Make him let him know like this is your team, but you better go out there and perform. And we've talked about this in the past because I believe we made this pick as well in the other mock draft, but I actually traded up to make that pick. So if this ended up like this and they don't have to trade up at all, they don't have to give up anything, that's a huge win for them. So that's a really good pick. And if the board ends it up this way, then I don't see why you don't go with him. You got to make sure you get your guy. That first and foremost.
Right.
And now we get to the number 10 pick, the Dallas Cowboys, my favorite team. This was the dream scenario. I was just waiting to see if you were going to take my guy. And that guy is Patrick Surtain. Patrick Surtain the second, actually. Sorry. Interesting thing. That franchise guy, I'll mention him again. He actually has him graded out as the third best prospect overall on his grading scale. He's rated as a 7.25 out of 8 on his scale, only behind Penei Sewell and Kyle Pitts.
Wow.
So that's very interesting.
Wow.
But just if you look at his numbers, he allowed 25 yards receiving or fewer in 10 of his 13 games this past year. All SEC defender, obviously. And he has all the tools. And he just has incredible instincts as well. I like that he's tall and has good length as a cornerback, especially since we're going to run that Seattle cover 3, cover 1 type of scheme. You need that Richard Sherman type of frame to be able to do that properly. So now you pair him up with Trevon Diggs on the other side, and then maybe we can do something this year. I think he'll make an immediate impact. I think this was just the obvious pick.
Yeah, I think he's a day one starter for sure. Good pick there. I think I was kind of expecting that if he fell to Dallas. I think that's what a lot of people are. That's where a lot of people have him going, is right there to Dallas at number 10. You also have the 11th pick for the in-division rival, the New York Giants.
Right. This is a little bit tougher. You got some wide receiver help, obviously, in the offseason. You're good there. The offensive line, I think you're good at offensive line. I think you can work with what you have. You still have that young left tackle, Andrew Thomas, that you drafted last year. You can continue to develop him. So with this pick, I'm going to be going with Micah Parsons out of Penn State, the linebacker.
Good one.
So
good one.
They have a linebacker that had a really, really good year last year that they acquired from Green Bay. I can't think of his name right now. It's a Hispanic name. I can't think of it right now, but he had a fantastic year last year. But the problem is he's a little bit undersized. So I think he would be very well suited moving him over to outside linebacker spot and having Michael Parsons run the middle of that defense. He's a thumper. He's old school in that way that he's very aggressive defending the run. He does bite from time to time to play action, but I think for the Giants with Joe Judge's attitude as a coach. He's a guy who doesn't want to give up anything easy, and that starts with stopping the run. And out of this class, he's the best at stopping the run out of this whole entire class. So um, he's a guy who's going to bring that tough mentality that's going to fit with the culture that they've been building. And he's going to make an impact right off the bat. He's just has all of the instincts that you need as a linebacker. And that's a tough position to go into as a rookie and play well. But on his tape, he showed that he has the athleticism and the skill to hold his own in coverage and still be able to read and react to everything in the backfield.
Okay, good pick there. I like that. I think that's a good spot for Parsons at number 11. And I could see the Giants adding defensive help if they don't go offensive line. But we know Dave Gettleman loves his offensive linemen. So we'll just have to see. Okay, we're on this run of 3 straight NFC East teams here. And we approach the Philadelphia Eagles at number 12. The Eagles have a lot of needs. We all know that. They need, cornerback help, wide receiver help. They could add offensive and defensive line. Of course, some philosophies say build from the inside out. But for Philly here, I think, you could go Devontae Smith sitting there on the board at receiver. You could go offensive and defensive line. But I think Philadelphia really needs to prioritize the cornerback position. Listen to this. In 2021, here's a short list of receivers that Philadelphia will face. Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, Kenny Golladay, Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, Deebo Samuels. And I could go on and on. That's about half the list. They face a gauntlet of really good quarterbacks, really good receivers, and you need cornerbacks to be able to defend. And right now, you have Darius Slay, and then that's about it. So I think this is the spot where you go J.C. Horn, the cornerback from South Carolina, given that Caleb Farley, who is talented but has injury concerns. Horn is, I think he's a younger Aqib Talib, put it that way. He's long, he's tall, he's athletic, agile athlete, outstanding instincts. He has that competitive bloodiness mentality. He's not going to be fazed by anything. You sent me the video about how he's faced so many NFL caliber wide receivers during his time at South Carolina in college. So I don't think he's going to be – I think he's a guy who's going to come in. He's going to compete from day one. He's got day one starter ability as a press man corner, which they really need. And given that they face all these good wide receivers, I think Horn's the guy that can come in. He's coachable, and he's not going to really be scared of anything. It's going to take an adjustment, period. He's going to, to need to refine some of his disciplinary skills and his finishing skills. Doesn't have, elite ball skills, but he'll come in, he'll be a day one starter, and he'll develop. Throw him right into the fire and let him face the best of the best right away and add to the cornerback room where they desperately need help. So
Right.
Let me type that in. And you are on the clock with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Right. And just one more thing. J.C. Horn, the thing that really stood out to me in that video that you mentioned that I sent you was the story arc that the video showed that he was on. It showed him in his sophomore year going against Alabama. Obviously, that year Alabama had Devonta Smith, obviously, and Jalen Waddle, but they also had Henry Ruggs and it was Jerry Jeudy as well. So 4 possible first rounders at receiver, and he went against all of them in that one game, and he gave up he got torched. He was just simply he was not good in that game. But he came back the next year and he changed his technique, and he's using his hands a lot more. He's a lot more physical, and he's using his um, for lack of a better term, he's using his size a lot better. Um, Before he had a technique where he would follow the receiver. Uh, he would like have like below leverage, and then he would try to jump across the route if it was cutting inside. But if you're not able to make the tackle, that's how you get beat, especially when you're playing quick receivers. So now with his different technique, staying up above the receiver, keeping a hand on him, he was a lot more effective last season. So really good pick there. Unfortunately, it was the Eagles, but oh well. Okay, the Chargers. This this is going to be an interesting year for the Chargers next year. I mean, going into the second year with Justin Herbert, obviously you have a lot of talent on defense. So now I think it's just time to righten up that offensive line, make sure Justin Herbert is steady, ready to go, has some type of protection on both tackles. They signed a tackle in free agency, but they also signed free agent center from the Packers. We mentioned him in a past podcast, but I'm gonna draft the tackle for the other side of the line, Christian Darrisaw, out of Virginia Tech. This was a little bit tough because I was looking up and down my board and I saw a lot of good options, frankly. I mean, this is a team that really you want to just go with the best player available. But they just didn't have that luxury. You got to get the offensive line straightened out, and you got to make sure Justin Herbert is safe because he's your franchise. It would have been nice for them to get the best player available because there were still some really good players on the board. If I look at my big board here, you're talking about like edge rushers starting to coming to the equation, Kwity Paye, guys like that. Obviously, a lot of good receivers still up there on the board as well. So it was a tough decision, but I think it's the right move to go offensive line.
I like that pick. I really like Darrisaw. I think he could be a more like consistent finisher in his blocks at times, but he shows outstanding body control and feet for a guy his size, and he also displays fantastic technique. So I think he can be a day one starter with some versatility to move along the offensive line, and you can play him kind of wherever you need. I really like that pick. So 14, the Minnesota Vikings. This is where it started to get really tough. The Vikings, I think they're set at pretty much all the offensive skill positions, receiver. They could probably use another tight end, but you wait till the later rounds to do that since there's a huge drop off. They have their running back. They maybe could use a little bit of offensive line help. But for me, last year they ranked bottom 5 in sacks. They were not good at getting to the quarterback and making opposing quarterbacks uncomfortable. And other than what's his name, I'm blanking. I'll think of it. But they really are in need of pass rush help, I think. I think you could maybe go corner 2, but I think the first edge rusher off the board comes right here. I'm taking Azeez Ojulari, the edge rusher from Georgia. The Athletic has him ranked as the top edge rushing prospect in this draft. They compared him to like a younger version of Yannick Ngakoue, which I think is really a really good comp. He doesn't have the ideal body type for pass rushing, but he's got excellent burst, excellent get off, He understands the game, pass rush geometry, not getting too far up the field. He's got physical hands. He's an explosive athlete, and you can play him in a bunch of different schemes. And he went against some of the best offensive linemen at the college level who will be entering in to the NFL level. So I think he has experience going against NFL level offensive line talent. I really like his athleticism. He's a guy who will come in and I think make an impact right away. There are other good edge rushers here too that you can make an argument for. Kwity Paye from Michigan's another guy that I considered. There are some other guys, Gregory Rousseau from Miami as well, but I went with Ojulari, high upside prospect out of Georgia to help the Vikings get to the quarterback, because you cannot win in this league, or it's very hard to win in this league when you don't have any pass rush. So they got to get better at that position. So that's what I did.
Right. And Daniil Hunter is still looking
Right.
like he's
That's
going
who
to
I was
hold out
thinking
a
of.
little bit. So I think that's a good pick there to, even if he doesn't come back, obviously have your successor in place. And if he does come back, have the guy on the other side be a dynamic duo once he develops and gets acclimated with the NFL level. So that's a good pick there. I definitely would go edge for the Vikings because that was a big need for them. So that brings me to the 15th pick, the New England Patriots.
The New England
Right. Okay, so they have their choice of basically any of the receivers of Rashad Bateman, obviously Devontae Smith still on the board, but I think what they did in terms of getting weapons in the offseason was good enough. I think getting a quarterback here is warranted. I think getting Mac Jones and securing what could possibly be your guy long term is well worth using that first round pick. When I look at this team, I mean, there's really not a lot of holes. They have a really good offensive line, solid running game with Damian Harris and what's his other guy, Rex Burkhead. I don't know if he's still there, but besides the point, really good running game. Obviously, Cam Newton back there as well, and they're just gonna pound the football. Like I said in the past podcast, I'm really high on the moves that they made because I think they all of the moves they made all add up to the plan of pounding the football down the defense's throats, and that's a style that wins. I mean, it's not the most flashy. It's not the greatest in terms of ratings or whatever, but they will get the W for you. So, but back to this pick, Mac Jones, obviously quarterback out of Alabama. His comparison for me is got to be Matt Ryan. I think he has a lot of the same mannerisms in the pocket. He moves around well within the pocket. He has a decent mobility within the pocket. I think that's one of the most underrated traits about him is the fact that he can still elude pressure even though he's not a runner. And he's really, really accurate. But the thing is, he had amazing talent around him. So the question is, can he make the throws in the tight windows, and does he have the arm strength to fit in the throws in the tight windows? That'll be yet to be seen, but that's a perfect spot for him because I know Belichick will put him in a position to succeed. So,
right. Yeah, that's a spot where a lot of mocks have him with the Patriots at 15. That's going to be the spot to look at for Mac Jones, I think. And if he drops further than that, you're looking at maybe a Washington football team, maybe looking for a quarterback. maybe even Chicago at 20 could be looking to add to their quarterback room. Who knows? But I think the Patriots is a good spot for him, as you mentioned. So that brings us to the halfway mark of this mock draft. I think we'll take a short break after I make this selection for the Arizona Cardinals here at 16. For the Cardinals, obviously they're looking to contend in a tough division. The NFC West, the Seahawks, the 49ers, and of course the Los Angeles Rams, who added Matt Stafford this offseason. I think, they have a solid core of offensive weaponry. I think this might have been, a week ago, this could have been like the first spot a team potentially looks at adding, running back talent. But now that they've added James Conner as sort of a depth piece next to Chase Edmonds, a nice little 1-2 punch, provided that both stay healthy. You don't need a running back here. You need to go out and improve that secondary, I think. They have 5 corners on the roster right now. 2 are undrafted and haven't played a single snap in the NFL. One is Robert Alford, who seems to be injured and constantly hurt. And then their other 2 guys are solid, but I think they could add another depth piece here. And with Caleb Farley sitting there at 16, I know he has the injury issues, the injury history, but I think as long as his checkups and his health checks out, I don't think you can let him slip past 16, given that you're going up against some of the best receiving cores in the NFL with the Rams, the Seahawks, and of course the 49ers. And he's too talented to pass up. I think he'll have some rough patches early on. And I mentioned injuries are a concern, but he's outstanding. He brings outstanding physical tools, natural instincts, outstanding ball skills, which I think is something they might be looking for. Patrick Peterson's not there anymore.
Right.
But he projects as, a press man starter with Pro Bowl upside. I don't think you can pass it up. They do need secondary help. I thought about maybe, defensive line, like interior defensive line, but they went ahead and drafted that last year, I think, early in the first round with Derek Brown out of Auburn, I'm pretty sure. So I think, and you can find that later on in the draft. But when it comes to quarterback talent, I think it drops off after, the first 4 or 5 prospects at that position. Pretty much after Gregory Newsome, I'm not really familiar with any of the other corner prospects in this draft. So I think corner is the way to go for Arizona. But with that, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back with Imy making the selection at number 17 for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Right. And before we enter the break, this is the perfect moment to remind you that this show is sponsored by the Patreon. We just made a Patreon, and we're still trying to figure out what type of bonus content we'll be creating over there. But if you want to support the show, help grow our show, everything we make over there is going to be put into the show to get better equipment, to get better setup. So if you like our content, if you like what we do and you want to support us, that's a good way to do it. And if you do, we really appreciate it. So with that, we'll enter the break here, and we'll be right back with the Las Vegas Raiders pick. See ya. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are back from our break, and I'm up with the 17th pick here for the Las Vegas Raiders. So, the Raiders, I'm definitely going to go pass rusher here, and I think I'm going to go with Gregory Rousseau out of Miami. Here's a guy who he opted out of this past year, and he's a guy who was raw. Um, his tape is very raw. Is the thing. He was a freshman basically. So, um, with that in mind, you just have to take it with a grain of salt that he improved since then, and he's it. I mean, he's had basically a year and a half to build out his body and develop his pass rush moves, even though he hasn't been on the field. So, um, just the body of work he was able to pull off just as a freshman was just so impressive. And the fact that he already had that as a freshman just goes to show you how talented this guy is. So, um, and I think if you're the Raiders, I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, you got to go with a guy who is has true number one rusher potential. And to me, out of the guys on the board, I mean, you could go Quiddy Pay, who's more of a speed guy, uh, but he doesn't have as much power as Gregory Rousseau does. So you want the guy who can be the complete package around the edge. So I went with Gregory Rousseau.
I really like that pick. High upside pick right there. So I'm up at number 18 with the Miami Dolphins. It's their second selection here in the first round. To recap, at number 6, I went with Jamar Chase, the wide receiver out of LSU. So that feels kind of the playmaking need. Here, I think they could be looking offensive line to protect Tua, or we know Brian Flores has a defensive background, and he would love to add, an athletic pass rusher or another linebacker there. Here, I'm not sure. I'm kind of unsure of what I want to do, but I think the best move, if you're really invested in Tua, I think the best move would, and since Elijah Vera Tucker is sitting right there, I think he'd be hard to pass up on. I think that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go with Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC, a guy who can play pretty much another versatile offensive lineman who can play pretty much any position. I think he'll probably end up being a guard, but many scouts say he's one of the more safer prospects in terms of like he has a low potential of being a bust. He's going to work. I think he's got a high floor. I think you have to, if you're going to give Tua another shot, you have to protect him, given he has injury concerns. He's not the most mobile quarterback in the world, and I think Vera Tucker's the best prospect here in terms of the offensive line. So Elijah Vera Tucker to Miami at 18.
Okay, interesting pick there. This guy, I mean, he's amazing in the run game. I mean, he's fantastic. So, I think he has some room to develop as a pass pro guy, but obviously in that Miami system, I mean, we've seen a lot of guys develop really well under that tutelage of Brian Flores and that coaching staff. So that's a good spot for him. I think he could really flourish there. Okay, number 19 pick, Washington football team. It seems like I've had all of the NFC East teams. Weird, but number 19th pick, they can go a couple different directions here. I mean, they have some options. I mean, obviously, a lot of quarterbacks have already come off the board, so I kind of ruled that out here. But I think knowing that this organization is moving to try to win with defense, and I think with signing Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think they know that they're going to have to lean on their defense. So I'm going to go ahead and get Jeremiah Owusu-Karamoah out of Notre Dame, linebacker. Um, here's a guy who a lot of draft boards have him as the top linebacker, not Micah Parsons. So, he is a guy who a lot of people are very hit or miss on him. A lot of varying opinions on this guy. He's got elite athleticism, and he's got all the statistics and awards you could ask for of your linebacker. And if you look at that Notre Dame defense these last couple of years, he's been the guy in the middle running that defense. So his body of work is extremely impressive, and you throw him in that Washington football team back or secondary, not really, but front seven is what I meant to say. I can't talk today. But you throw him in that front seven, you already have obviously an elite front four of all first-round picks. You throw him in there, and he could just attack, basically, because those guys up front are going to win. So he can just go and plug up the holes. And in that role where he's just flying around the field, he will be perfect because he's got the speed to go sideline to sideline.
Good one. Good one. I really like that pick. And given Ron Rivera's history, I think Owusu-Karamoah is one of those guys who just needs to be put into the right system, the right scheme. And I think he fit really well as a versatile kind of middle of the field linebacker. That a guy that I think Ron Rivera will really, really like to develop and work with. So good pick there for the Washington football team. They're going to have a really good defense. For the Bears at number 20, we're almost, to that, or we're entering the playoff teams of last year, I guess. The Bears barely slid into the playoffs, obviously got rocked by New Orleans in the wild card game, but we all expected that. No more Mitch Trubisky. They brought in Andy Dalton to fill that void. Questionable decision in my opinion, but it is what it is. And they're obviously not going to reach on a quarterback here. If they were set on, taking a quarterback, they may trade up, I think. Maybe for like a guy like Mac Jones, but I don't see that happening. I think they got to protect Andy Dalton. I think they're solid on defense. That's really the strength of their football team. They did lose Kyle Fuller, so maybe cornerback could be in the conversation here. You have Gregory Newsome, the next best corner on the board in many people's eyes from Northwestern. But I think you got to go offensive line. They have a void at right tackle, and Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, I think would fill that void fantastically. He played naturally on the right side in his career at Oklahoma State. He's got unique power. He's got a competitive demeanor about him that just kind of like speaks Chicago. He's got that Chicago toughness mindset, really consistent in finishing his blocks. Big guy, good in pass protection, good in the run game, the next best tackle on the board. I think he fills that right tackle void perfectly. So I think he's a little underrated. I don't think a lot of people are talking about him, but I think, if he were to even slide to my Steelers, I think my Steelers might, think about it. He's one of those underrated guys that we could look back on and say, oh my gosh, he turned into a Pro Bowler and no one really expected him to. I think he has that type of potential. So go ahead and build the inside first, and then build, inside out. So Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle, Oklahoma State for the Bears at 20.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting pick there. I like that pick. I know we basically said that about every pick here, but this class is really just so deep in at so many positions. Really, for a lot
Right.
of these picks for these football teams, that when you get to these 15 to 30 range, you just got to take the best player available, basically. Um, so you really can't go wrong. So with that being said, here the next pick will be the Indianapolis Colts at 21. Okay. The Colts just had their left tackle retire. But my pick that I was looking at Tevin Jenkins, you just went up and stole him. So now I'm thinking I might get a wide receiver, because
Okay.
if you look at the Colts wide receiver room, they have T.Y. Hilton, obviously the veteran, um, been there a long time, really just consistent. Dexter Pittman, I'm not sure what he is yet. He had a really solid year last year. A little bit underrated, a little bit of an underrated year, if you ask me. But I think you could add a depth piece here. I think there's a lot of really good players on the board. But I think this pick might surprise you. I'm going to go with Rondale Moore out of Purdue.
Wait
Um,
a minute. Over Devontae Smith?
oh, shoot. He's still on the board?
Yeah.
I thought he was already. Oh, shoot. Okay. Then that's a no brainer. I'm taking Devontae Smith. Oh, my goodness. That makes me rethink some of these other picks that I made. I mean, uh, actually, I could argue for picking him at any of these spots, but also, yeah, I think it's okay that he fell. I don't think he'll fall in real life like this, but I guess that's just how it turned out in my board. I just forgot about him. I guess that's my mistake. But that's an easy pick. Devontae Smith. Wow, the Heisman Trophy winner falls to 21 to the Indianapolis Colts. You throw him in there. Carson Wentz, he's just going to have a field day. If you look at Devontae Smith, he's a guy who he's just a technician as a route runner. And you see it more and more now. Obviously, you want a guy with elite speed and size and everything like that. Obviously, you have questions about his size, but um, he just is a insane work ethic. He is just a insane work ethic guy. If you just look at the way he runs routes and the way he understands sitting in the holes of defenses and all of the little technical things of being a wide receiver, he has mastered all of them. So, if he stays healthy, I don't see a scenario where he's not productive. I mean, he could have um, top 10, top 15 receiver potential. So that's a no brainer pick.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting with these mock drafts. In every mock draft, it seems, you go on those mock draft simulators, there's always a surprise guy who always seems to drop. And, with the amount of talent in this year's draft, it wouldn't surprise me if one of these guys that either, we picked earlier or that we picked now drops more than expected. So, a Smith there, it's fantastic value, obviously. Might be the steal of the draft for the Colts. And a guy as smart as, what's his name? The general manager for Indianapolis, Chris Ballard, isn't going to pass up a talent like that. So with the Titans at number 22, it's interesting with the Titans. They had an interesting offseason. They added, they addressed their pass rush issues and some of their defensive line issues. I thought about, I'm thinking about adding depth to that interior defensive line. I still think they could use help, on the interior and stopping the run. But I think the secondary is the more pressing need right now, given that they were bottom 4 in passing yards allowed, passing touchdowns allowed. Their secondary was absolutely horrendous this past season. So I'm going to go with the next best cornerback on the board, Greg Newsome, cornerback from Northwestern.
Interesting.
For the Titans, you look at what the Titans did. They had to get rid of Malcolm Butler and Adoree Jackson, and they brought in I'm blanking on his name. Who'd they bring in? I'll find it real fast, but they brought in Jenkins or Janoris Jenkins. That's who I was thinking of, to kind of fill that void, but he's not really a long-term replacement. And they need a lot of help in that secondary. You know, you're going to be facing Trevor Lawrence probably, and a lot of young talent on that Jacksonville team. Obviously, now that the Colts have Devontae Smith and all those receivers, I mean, it's not an easy division to play in. There are a lot of talented wide receiving cores. I think Newsome has a lot of upside. What did I write down for him? He has some durability concerns, but he's fluid in his transitions. He's got natural instincts. He was coached hard in college, so he won't mind being coached hard by a guy like Mike Vrabel, who obviously loves defense, is a defensive-minded coach. I think he projects as a NFL starter. I'm not sure, he might take, more time to develop than usual, but why not just go out and solve one of your needs right away? I think they could go a lot of different directions. But with the amount of depth that there is at the receiver position and the offensive line position, which were two other positions I had slated for them, I think you could wait on those positions and go ahead and get one of the top cornerbacks in the draft, with Greg Newsome at 22.
Okay. Yeah. That's a really good pick, but I was not expecting that. I actually had Asante Samuel as my next quarterback on my list, but obviously Newsome was right behind him, and really it's all about scheme fit when it comes to corners. Really, I mean, you have guys who are best suited in man coverage and just playing straight up, and you also have guys who need to be in zone. They just don't have the speed to just go man on man with some of these wide receivers in the NFL. So I think Greg Newsome is actually the best scheme fit that you could have picked right there. So nice pick there. Okay. 23rd overall pick. The New York Jets are back on the board. So already picked Zach Wilson in the number 2 overall pick. So now, okay, this is tough. I think I might go with Rashad Bateman, wide receiver out of Minnesota. You want to get Zach Wilson some receiving targets, some guys he can throw to and just throw it up to and trust. You already have Denzel Mims, obviously, and what's his name? The slot guy. I'm so bad with names tonight. I don't know what is wrong with me. I sound like an absolute noob, but it's just that kind of night. I probably will think of all these names like as soon as the podcast ends. I guarantee it. It's like, oh my goodness. Ugh, okay. Jamison Crowder. There we go. He's in the slot already, but you put Rashad Bateman on the other side, across from Mims, and I think you have a really solid top 3 there, in terms of wide receivers, and rather young, in terms of outside receivers. That would be an interesting duo, in my opinion. Those two guys who were have really good size and have similar skill sets, but I think they would really complement each other well.
Okay. So Rashad Bateman, yeah, a lot of scouts are high on this dude. Played under a good coach, and PJ Fleck, I believe, is Minnesota's head coach. Really good head coach,
Right.
and a really good conference with a lot of talented cornerbacks, including Gregory Newsome, who was just picked right before him. So, yeah, I like that. The Jets, they need help in a lot of places, but give Zach Wilson or whichever quarterback they end up taking at 2 all the weapons he could ever ask for. It never hurts to do that. Okay, so that brings us to the number 24 overall pick with my Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, obviously, there are a lot of needs right now in the Steel City. Offensive line is sort of a weakness right now. And also the running back position is sort of an uncertainty as well. And then obviously I think they could add another cornerback maybe in the later rounds, maybe another pass rusher too. Or linebacker for some linebacker depth. But right now, given that they have, I don't think there's an offensive lineman here that would be good value, given that, the Vera Tuckers of the world and the Jenkins of the world and the Darrisaw are all off the board. And they're really in need of an offensive tackle. And the next best thing is Sam Cosmi out of Texas, who I like, but I think will likely end up going in the second round or maybe at the very end of the first. I'm between Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, but I think I'm going to go with Najee Harris, the running back from Alabama. Obviously, Etienne is more of a home run hitting, explosive sort of runner who, when he hits that burst, good luck catching him type thing. And Harris is more of a run through you, pound it down your throat, physical type of runner that I really like and I think really fits the Pittsburgh Steelers. We need to get back to pounding the football. Obviously, offensive line is going to play a huge part, but I think Harris, given his physicality, will be a perfect fit for the Steelers. So we need that next bell cow. We need the next Le'Veon Bell. So
right,
there we go.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit it right on the head there. I mean, obviously, I've seen a lot of mock drafts. I've watched so many over these past few weeks, and it seems like there's a different pick for the Steelers in every single mock draft that I've seen. Like there's a lot of different directions that this team can go, but getting a running back, I think, will raise the ceiling of the running game first and foremost. I think obviously the offensive line matters, but I think for a long time y'all have leaned on the offensive line, and I think it's time you get a running back who will raise the offensive line. Like at the end of the day, you still need a guy who can break it, like just who can just every once in a while can just break one, get a touchdown every once in a while. Like I just don't think James Conner had that type of explosiveness. He was solid, but I think especially last year, he showed some limitations in terms of athleticism. So that's a really good pick there. I like that. So now with the 25th overall pick, just 7 picks left now. The Jacksonville Jaguars are back on the clock. They picked up Trevor Lawrence with the number 1 overall pick. And this is an interesting spot because I saw a lot of mock drafts where they actually traded down out of the first round, and obviously those were 2-round mock drafts, so that worked a little bit differently. And we're not doing trades today, so that obviously can't do that. But I think I'm gonna make a pick that may surprise you. I'm gonna go with. I was thinking. I was thinking tight end Pat Fryermuth, but I think that's a little bit too high for a tight end right now. I think he'll go early second round. I think that's just a little bit of a reach. So I think this is really tough.
Yeah, these are the picks where it gets hairy.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with Kwity Paye out of Michigan.
Okay, good one.
I mean, he fell a little bit in terms of where a lot of mock drafts have him. And I think this is just the situation where you go with the best player available. I mean, you would have loved to have gotten a wide receiver right here, but I think, like you said, as you said earlier, you alluded to earlier, this is such a deep wide receiver class. I mean, I've heard from a lot of different draft analysts that I listen to that they're regarding this class as one of the deepest wide receiver draft classes of all time going into it. So um, I think you can get a wide receiver in the second or the third round that will have the same impact as any of these guys available right now. And getting Kwity Paye to go opposite of Josh Allen, their other defensive end, I think obviously both guys have coming from Michigan, and I think they were teammates for a year, if I'm not mistaken. But um, they both have very different skill sets. Kwity Paye is a speed guy off the edge. He's not as good at being a power guy. That may be one thing that he needs to develop. But um, we saw the Panthers defensive end last year. What's his name? Artie Burns. No, something Burns. I can't think of his name right now, but he had a fantastic year last year, and he is a speed guy. He's a burner. So that makes me feel a little bit better about getting a guy who's a speed pass rush guy, because I know that a guy with his mold of player can be successful right away. And I think that's what they need.
Okay. I think that's a good pick. You got to have depth at the pass rush position so you can rotate those guys in and out and create constant pressure on the opposing team's quarterback. So this is where my prep kind of dropped off these last couple picks because I just didn't have enough time in my schedule. But for the Browns, I'd love to make a bad pick here. Given that they're already, so loaded and they're in my favorite team's division. But I'll be respectful. I don't, they just added Jadeveon Clowney. So they obviously aren't going to probably go pass rusher, at least with their first pick. And they're so loaded now. They added pieces to the secondary, which was kind of the weakness of this team. I think you could still add depth there. I mean, this is a pretty good all-around talented roster, in my opinion. They obviously don't need skill position help. They're set at quarterback. They're set up the offensive line. I think if they do make a pick here, it will be defense, and it will likely be in the secondary. So who's the next best corner on the board?
Yeah, for me, it's Asante Samuel, but it might be different on your board.
Let's see here. I don't know. What do you think about Cleveland? I'm not really sure here.
I mean, I think they could go interior D line. I think that could be pretty beneficial for them. There's Christian Barmore still available. I mean, if you want to add some.
I think I'll go Barmore.
Okay.
I think he's the top, by far the top interior defensive line prospect on the board. Um, he's solid. He's got, pass rush ability, run stopping ability, and it doesn't hurt to have depth on that. They're good at edge, but it doesn't hurt to have depth on that interior defensive line. And I think he's probably one of the better prospects here left on the board. And I think he's a for sure first round pick. And given that they spent a good amount of money in their secondary, although I think they could still add a depth piece later on, Barmore could be like a day one starter type thing. And that's what you really want out of your first. You want an immediate impact guy. And there's no guarantee that one of the secondary players, secondary, corner, safety, could come in and be that for them. So Barmore, I think, is a good pick for Cleveland at 26.
Right, and you obviously working to solidify every position on that D line to
Right.
go alongside Myles Garrett and alleviate some of that pressure on him. You see that in a lot of different spots in the NFL. They have duos now. You don't just have one guy running that pass rush. You got to have a guy opposite him to take that pressure off. So I think that really works there. Okay. Next pick on the board is the Baltimore Ravens up there. And this is one of the few picks later in the draft that I actually have something in mind for. I'm going to go with Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma. And that might be a little bit surprising of a pick because there's a lot of people that aren't very high on him. But I watched a little bit of tape on him, and I watched Brett Coleman's video, who I think is one of the best draft analysts out there, in my opinion. He did a video titled, "This guy is the most violent player in the draft that you've never heard of." And I mean, I watched that entire video and I was just thoroughly impressed by how just a lot of the plays, it just seemed like he just wanted to bury whoever he was blocking. Like he didn't just push him down the field. He knocked him to the ground after the play was over and stood over him, stared him down, and was just nasty. I mean, having that guy in the locker room who's going to be physical and set the tone on the offensive line at the center position, that's really important. And going back to how this fits for the Ravens, I think last year they were really hindered by what their offensive line struggled on the interior, because obviously they have that running game where they run it a ton. So you need that offensive line solidified and ready to go, and you throw him in there and you're immediately improving.
Yeah, I think he's the best center prospect on a lot of people's boards. So, a lot of people I've seen have him going more in the second round. But hey, if they think he's, it's all about how all these teams rate these different prospects differently. And if they have them high on their board, go ahead and take them.
Right.
So for the Saints, this is an interesting situation here. They came into the offseason in cap hell. And they obviously, Drew Brees retired. They lost a lot of pieces, or they were forced to because they had to. They couldn't afford everybody. I think here, I'm not, I haven't looked at a lot of mocks for the Saints. I think adding a, linebacker in the middle of that defense could be nice. And there are two really talented players that I like at the linebacker position sitting right there. Um, you have Zabin Collins, the dude out of Tulsa, and you also have Jamin Davis, the kid out of Kentucky, who a lot of people are high on. He has really nice upside, impressive size, speed athlete. Um, he's a magnet to the football. Um, I didn't do a whole lot of prep on like what the Saints need, but I know that they lost a lot, and I think given that Davis played in the SEC, he's experienced. He averaged 10.2 tackles per game and 3 interceptions last year. Productive player, talented upside. I think that's what I'll do here for the Saints. Jamin Davis, linebacker from the University of Kentucky.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I I saw a lot of analysts have him fly up their boards. I mean, a lot of people are high on this guy. So I think that's a really solid pick. I mean, obviously you have um, their linebacker core. They have Demario Davis and somebody else. Is it the guy from the 49ers that they traded for last year? Um, I can't think of
I
his
know who you're
name.
talking about.
Right. But I'm terrible with names tonight. I apologize, everyone. But really good pick there. I mean, uh, getting someone for the middle of that defense. I mean, for them to be successful next year, that defense has to play elite because you're going to have Jameis Winston back there, and he's a question mark. Let's be honest. I mean, you gotta have a basically flawless defensive season if you're going to make the playoffs. So,
Right.
really good pick there. Okay. The next pick is the Green Bay Packers. Okay. Obviously, whenever the Green Bay Packers are on the board in the first round, the first thing anybody thinks of is, are they taking a wide receiver yet? And um, for me as the in the spot of GM of the Packers, the answer is actually going to be no. I'm thinking. Hmm. This is tough. You know what? I think I'm going to go corner because
Okay.
if you looked at what happened last year in that NFC Championship game, um, if you look at specifically Kevin King, he was torched. I mean, not only the PI to end the game. I mean, that wasn't that bad of a play, but um, that play where he got beat to end halftime. I mean, that was just terrible. I mean, he's not a bad player, but you need a depth piece to in terms of certain matchups to throw in certain situations and trust back there and to not give up that big play. And the pick here is going to be Asante Samuel Jr. Obviously, the son of Asante Samuel, the longtime corner from the Eagles, um, is a guy who has amazing technique. That's the biggest thing that jumps off for me when I see Asante Samuel Jr. I mean, um, he played for Florida State last year. They weren't in the spotlight very much, but he was still playing a lot of high level receivers of receiving talent last year, and he performed extremely well. And the biggest thing is I think he has a lot of scheme versatility as well. He can man you up and you can trust him in man coverage if you give him a little bit of about 5 yards off. I don't like him as much in press because he doesn't have the uh and like sideline to sideline speed or not sideline to sideline, just straight line speed basically to keep up with wide receivers, like say on a go route. But everything else, I mean, he has everything in the book. I mean, he's just technically sound, and I think um, he's one of those guys who has a high floor. I don't think he's a player who may be getting to Pro Bowls all the time, but he's just a solid player who's going to be in the NFL a long time.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, he's definitely one of the top 4, top 5 corners in the draft. There are a lot of cornerback needy teams, as we've seen here. So, and if you can get a guy like that who has high upside this late for a team like Green Bay, that'll do for me. So we've come to, as you mentioned, the teams that were in the championship games last year in the respective conferences. And we come to the 30th overall pick with the Buffalo Bills. I think for Buffalo, I think edge rusher, is going to be in the equation. They were kind of middle of the pack in sacks last year. I think actually running back could be in the conversation here. I don't think they'll go that route, but I'm not sure they have that home run hit as good as their offense was last year. I'm not sure they have like that bell cow running back that they can go to in the running game for 25, 30 carries a game. I like Devin Singletary, but I'm just, I think they could go running back, but I think they're going to end up adding to that defense. Sean McDermott obviously has a defensive background, and their defense could be shaky at times last season, and we saw it in that Kansas City game. I do think they need a little bit of help at the pass rusher position. Let's see. So Russo's off the board. Ojulari's off the board. Pay is off the board. Let's go with another guy a lot of people are high on. Was second team All ACC last year. He led Miami in tackles for loss and sacks. Jalen Phillips, that outside linebacker from Miami. I think their other edge rusher, Hughes or something, is going to be turning like 34 or 35 next year. He's aging. Still a solid player, but I think they could bring in more youth at the edge rusher position. And Phillips is a guy with high upside that I like. So I'll go with Jalen Phillips, the outside linebacker or edge rusher, whatever you want to call it, from Miami.
Right. And he's a polarizing guy. He really is. I mean, I see him on draft boards going anywhere from like 13 to like 40. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's all about the medicals with him. I mean, it's just the fact that if he gets one more concussion, he could be retired and out of the league. I mean, it's just a really tough situation for him. And I think if he stays healthy and he's able to get on the field, I mean, you're looking at extremely high value in terms of a late first round pick. So that could be a home run selection. And I mean, you're late first round, you see that guy available. I mean, that's kind of like a Michael Porter Jr. situation, a guy who has a lot of injuries or a lot of injury history, and you just take a flyer on him and see what happens
Yeah.
because he has star potential.
Another NFL draft analyst I really like from The Athletic, Dane Brugler. He's just a wizard when it comes to this stuff. His evaluation of Phillips, and you basically hit it right on the head. He says, overall, Phillips has first-round talent with his body type, twitchy athleticism, and nose for the football, but the medical feedback will ultimately decide his NFL draft grade. He projects as a high-energy rusher similar to Ryan Kerrigan when healthy. And Ryan Kerrigan is a really good player. So if he can just turn into that, maybe a more athletic version of that, the Bills, they're obviously going to be in Super Bowl contention, but that just makes them even more scary.
Right. Exactly.
As
Getting
a
after
threat
Mahomes.
Yeah, exactly. So we're down to the last two picks of our first ever alternate mock draft. So this belongs to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right. And this is pretty simple. It's just best tackle available. Obviously, they cut Mitchell Schwartz and what's his name? Gosh darn it. He literally just got injured in the AFC Championship game.
Eric Fisher.
Fisher, right? Eric Fisher, former high draft pick. Uh, so it's just best tackle available, and for how the draft board shaped out, it's got to be Samuel Cosme. Wait, where is he? Oh yeah, there he is. Samuel Cosme. He's still available, right there, easy.
Sam Cosme, that was the pick.
Right, Samuel Cosme, and they picked up Kyle Long. They picked him up out of retirement. So if he turns out to be solid, then boom, you we're able to move past that little hiccup there.
I like that pick. Obviously, Cosme is a guy I'm sort of more familiar with since I at Texas and I watch a lot of Texas football. And I think this is kind of the range where a lot of like the top elite offensive tackles will be off the board, but Cosme will provide value right around this late first round, early second round um, spot, where I think he'll be looking to go to a lot of teams that are still looking to add offensive line depth, because that's really what it comes down to at this point. Once the Penei Sewells and the Christian Darrisaw's and the Rashawn Slaters are off the board. But as we've mentioned time and time again, it's a really deep offensive tackle, offensive line draft class. So go ahead and get some extra protection for Patrick Mahomes because we saw what happened in the Super Bowl. It was ugly. So that brings us to the last pick of the first round, the Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They just have an unbelievable wealth of riches everywhere you look. So it's honestly like best available on their board is who will they will be picking at this spot. I don't know. What do you think? What are you thinking?
I think I really like Travis Etienne at this spot. I mean,
okay.
You look at speed, being able to catch out of the backfield. I think Tom Brady will feast with that guy.
You know, a 1-2 punt. Well, do they still have Fournette and do they still have what's his name?
I know who you're talking about.
Ronald Jones and
right.
Fournette.
Right. They have Ronald Jones, but I believe Fournette is still a free agent as of right now.
Okay. So given that information, I think that could be, I mean, obviously Tom Brady's going to feast having a guy like Patrick Etienne who he can use not only in the running game but also in the passing game. That's kind of Etienne's like one of his best traits is his ability to catch the ball and then take off. His yards after catch type thing. I think they're solid on the offensive line. They obviously got a Pro Bowl caliber talent last year in Tristan Wirfs, who I think will eventually someday get there. And they have a wealth of riches at receiver. They're loaded on defense, obviously. along the front seven and in the secondary. I think there's a lot of young, really good players in that secondary who just need more time to develop. So yeah, I think you convinced me to go running back here. There's obviously another guy that a lot of people like going in the first round out of North Carolina, and Javonte Williams, I think his
Right,
name is.
right, exactly.
But I think he's going to drop, to early second round. So yeah, why not? Add to your wealth of riches, Tom Brady, and uh, get Travis Etienne out
Right.
of.
And another option
Out of
would have been Christian Barmore if he was still available. I think that would have been a really good selection, just given the fact that Sue is aging and he's also on the last year of his deal. So you could throw him in the following year as the starter to be the next guy. But if you look at our picks here, is there anything that you would have liked to revise? Obviously we saw Devontae Smith fall. Um, but I think this looks good, man. I think we made a lot of good picks
I
here.
think I think for the first time that we've done this, obviously last year we put our heads together and we prepared a full mock draft beforehand,
Right.
where we both, did that. But I think for the first time doing this, we did a really good job looking at needs and then putting, a fit to that need for most of these picks. Um, I don't know. I think I need more time to I can't spontaneously look at all of this and, point out anything I would necessarily revise, but maybe on our next episode, we can come back to this and look at, maybe what we would change. Given
One thing I'd say right off the bat, like the first thing I look at from looking at this draft board is Devontae Smith at 18, possibly to the Dolphins. Obviously Elijah Vera Tucker. You want to really solidify the offensive line, and you
sure, but
have Will Fuller
drafted.
already there. So I think the argument against that would be that they have similar skill sets already.
But
So
I already picked Jamar Chase at
right.
at 6, so that's why I didn't go receiver. So I think it would be either offensive line as I went or defense. And something that really jumps off the page to me is Zaven Collins, the linebacker from Tulsa, who is mocked high in a lot of mock drafts.
Yeah.
Didn't go in this, but there's always the amount of talent that's in this draft. There's always going to be someone who drops unexpectedly.
Right.
But yeah, I think obviously either way, Smith was a definite surprise. I think we just kind of forgot about him.
Right. And I think I just assumed he was off the board. I think if I were to pick now, I think I would take him at 19 for the Washington football team. I think that would be the choice there.
That would make sense.
Because their defense is already really good. They already have a really good linebacker, Will Holcomb, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's already solidified. Their defense is already fantastic. So I think Devontae Smith was the move there. I think I just assumed he was off the board for some reason. I just had a brain fart.
Easy to lose track. But just to recap before we sign off, this was our full first round mock draft 1.0. We alternated selections. Just to give a quick recap, 5 quarterbacks going in the top 15 as we mostly expect. Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields going 1, 2, 3. Kyle Pitts off the board at 4 to the Falcons. That's the best non-quarterback prospect possibly in the draft. And then you have offensive line help for the Bengals, Penei Sewell from Oregon. Jamar Chase from the Dolphins give to us some wide receiver help at 6. Emmy went with Rashawn Slater, the offensive tackle from Northwestern, the Lions. Dan Campbell, ground and pound type thing, mindset for Detroit. I think that fits really well. I went with Jalen Waddle for the Panthers, another depth piece at wide receiver for a Sam Darnold to utilize, or a Teddy Bridgewater, whoever might be the starter there. And then Trey Lance dropped to number 9. So I gave the Broncos Trey Lance. He can come in, compete day one with Drew Lock. I still think Drew Lock will be the starter, but hey, you never know. And then Emmy went with Patrick Surtain, the cornerback from Bama. And that is a recap of the top 10. I will try and make this available to you guys on Twitter. I'm gonna try to put it in a PDF form or something like that. Post it on Twitter or somewhere.
All right, maybe take a screenshot and put the picture
and
up.
you guys can see it. And obviously this was a pretty long episode, but you can obviously go to our selections, fast forward, do whatever you need. But this was really fun. I really enjoyed this. So yeah, that's pretty much going to do it.
Right. I hope y'all enjoyed this. And leave a like if you enjoyed, obviously. And I was looking at the statistics the other day, and about half of our viewers aren't subscribed. So if you're watching this right now, go ahead and hit that red button. You know you want to. It's right there. It's free. It takes 1 second. We want to grow our channel, and we're really working hard to do prep and make the content high quality. So with all that being said, thanks for watching, and we'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.